Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's broadcast. My name is Jena Doyle. I am the Director of Programs and Congressional Engagement here at HillVets, and tonight I am super excited to be joined by 5 incredible women honorees of the HillVets 100 list of 2019. As part of our HillVets 100 and 100 digital promotion series, and in honor of Women's History Month, which is March, if anyone didn't know that, tonight we are gathered here to discuss the stories of these incredible and accomplished women and the importance of women voices in our veteran and military communities. So a special shout out to our panelists. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We're really excited about our conversation, and thank you all to our audience for tuning in. So without further ado, I would just like to quickly introduce our panels, and then they're going to have a chance to introduce themselves and tell you all a little bit about who they are. So first tonight we have Charmain Bogue of Education Service at the Veteran Benefits Administration. We have Amanda Huffman, who is an author and podcaster. We also have Laurine Carson, also of the VBA, but Compensation Service, and Lindsey Finnegan of the Travis Manion Foundation, and last but certainly not least, Maria Triplaar of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. So honestly, all of you are all so accomplished, and we are truly thankful and grateful for you all to be here and that you are able to join in our discussion. And I'm super excited for what we're going to chat about. So now each of you, I'm going to ask for you just to tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your connection to the veteran and military communities. So Laurine, you're first on my screen, so I'm going to pass it over to you, and then we'll get started if that sounds great.
Thank you, Jena. Good afternoon. My name is Laurine Carson, and I am the Deputy Executive Director of Policy and Procedures and Interagency Collaboration in Compensation Service at the Veterans Benefits Administration in the Department of Veterans Affairs. As the daughter of an Army veteran and sister of a Navy veteran, I came to work for the Department of Veterans Affairs almost 32 years ago, following in the footsteps of my mother, who also worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I started as a GS3 clerical typist, and I moved through several positions involving veterans disability claims processing and through the leadership ranks to the Senior Executive Service. In my current role, I address legislation, regulations, and disability claims processing policies and procedures, and anything that's related to veterans' compensation claims when veterans suffer a disease, illness, or injury that is due to military service.
Thank you, Laurine. Happy to have you. Next up, we have Lindsey. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself, Lindsey, for us?
Sure. Thanks, Jena. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsey Finnegan. I'm Senior Director of Membership at Travis Manion Foundation. I've been working at the organization for just shy of 10 years now. And prior to meeting my husband, I actually had no interaction or even friends that were in the military. I'm now going on 13 years of marriage to an active duty military man, and I have 2 little boys, 6 and almost 4 years old, who have actually known nothing but the military lifestyle. My transition to working within the military and survivor nonprofit industry was a direct reaction to the loss of a dear family friend, Lieutenant Steele Brendan Looney, who was killed in Afghanistan in a helicopter crash in 2010. Giving back in community service has always been an important part of my life growing up, and it's still really important for me now with my family. And I'm lucky that at Travis Manion Foundation, we challenge people to ask themselves, if not me, then who, and to be big in the small things. So we empower our nation's heroes, our veterans, and our survivors to lead this movement of character. And I'm incredibly thankful that I now have the daily opportunity to share the stories of these leaders, their families, and America's fallen heroes like Brendan, Travis Manion, Robert Kelly, and the thousands of others who have sacrificed it all to inspire me, my family, and our TMF community. So I'm excited to be here and talk about women in the industry tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsey. Amanda, you're up next. Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, I'm Amanda Huffman. I am the owner of Airman to Mom LLC. I host a podcast called Women of the Military, where women share their stories of being in the military. I am an Air Force veteran, and I am a military spouse. I served in the Air Force for 6 years as a civil engineer, and I deployed to Afghanistan. And it was through becoming a veteran and being a military spouse that I found the stories of military women, and I wanted to share them so that other people can know about the things that women have done and the things that women are doing right now. And so I love getting to share the stories of other women and use my voice as a platform to encourage and inspire other women to share their stories.
Thanks, Amanda. Glad you're here. Next up, we have Maria. Maria, can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
Hi, I'm the staff director for the Republican staff on the House Veterans Affairs Committee under Ranking Member Bost. I began my work in veterans-related issues shortly after I graduated from law school at the Board of Veterans Appeals. And I was there for a year, and then I went into private practice representing veterans and service members in their claims before the Veterans Court, the VA, and occasionally DOD. Former Chairman Jeff Miller brought me on to the staff in 2014, and I have been there ever since. And recently, as I mentioned, I became the staff director under Ranking Member Bost. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Maria. And Charmain, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, I'm Charmain Bogue. I'm the Executive Director of Education Service at the Department of Veterans Affairs, specifically Veterans Benefits Administration. I actually oversee all the GI Bill programs. So post 9/11 GI Bill, Montgomery, that is really my wheelhouse. And each year we service 1 million GI Bill beneficiaries, nearly 1 million GI Bill beneficiaries, from service members to veterans to the spouse and to the children. And we pay out about $12 billion in our program. It's a pretty amazing journey for me to get here. I will say that I started my career umpteen years ago. No, just joking, about 15 years ago. And I started out as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, actually, in the New York regional office. And I really felt a connection to VA because I grew up as, a child in that military life. Both my mother and father served in the United States Army. So I understand that dynamic in terms of growing up in that environment and transitioning out. And I wanted to find a way to give back. And the VA has been a great place for me to do that, to be able to still feel connected to that military community. So I'm excited to be here today and to talk to issues as it relates to women in the community and how we will succeed. So thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you all are incredibly accomplished women in your own rights, in your own fields. Everyone comes from a different background. We have a legislative staffer. We have 2 executive staffers. We have someone who works as a advocate and a entrepreneur and women creative. So each of you coming from different spaces, the one thing we all have in common is we're women. Obviously, we're here to talk about our accomplishments, but also our challenges. And no matter what profession you come from, women, it happens to be, face some challenges in the professional world. So can each of you touch a little bit about your challenges that you faced throughout your career and how you have persevered to overcome them? Maria, you want to get us started on this one?
Sure. I think the biggest challenges I faced as a female in the field were when I was in private practice. In the organization I worked for, trained many veteran service organizations, advocates. And I think particularly because this was some time ago now, as a younger female seeking to establish myself as a knowledgeable expert in the field, in what was at that time dominated by men, was an interesting experience. I also, looking back on my career in preparation for this evening, realized that I've never actually worked for another woman. I've always worked for men. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was an interesting commentary. And many things are changing. I will say, in looking at my peers around the Hill, the number of women staff directors on standing committees has doubled just between last Congress and this. So it is changing, but I think it's an interesting dynamic to establish yourself in that field. I will say, on the Hill, there are many women staffers, so I am certainly in good company. But I did think it was, looking back on my years in serving the veteran community, what I saw in terms of women in leadership roles.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Amanda, what about you? Any challenges specific to your career path and your, career profession?
Yeah, for me, being an entrepreneur, I find that imposter syndrome is something that I reoccurringly have to deal with because I sometimes think that I'm not good enough or that I shouldn't ask someone to do something because who am I? I'm just Amanda. And so that's one of the challenges that I face continually. And the one thing that I've learned from entrepreneurship is that the worst thing that people can say is no. So even when I don't feel like they're going to say yes, I say, what's the worst they could do is say no. And I've used that as a way to go forward. And it's always surprising to me how many doors open when I take that leap of faith and don't listen to that inner critic inside of myself and just take that risk.
Definitely. Imposter syndrome these days is so real. Lindsey, what about you? Any challenges you faced?
Yeah, it's interesting, Maria, to hear you talk about how you only had male bosses for a long time, but were in good company of a lot of female coworkers. Growing up myself, I played a lot of sports and found myself surrounded by a male-dominated environment. Moving into the career side of my life, 10 years ago, one thing that I find I'm constantly running into is the discrepancy between male and female leaders, specifically around the characteristics of being strong, driven, and passionate about personal accountability, and how to really break through that. Whether people believe it's out there or not, characteristics of being strong and driven from the male side is viewed as being a great leader. But if you're a female and you exhibit those characteristics, you tend to be labeled as emotional or aggressive and too hard. And that's something that I find myself bumping into quite often. And I'm lucky now that at Travis Manion Foundation, what we do is we really invest in self-development uniquely centered around positive psychology and character strengths. And so I've been able to actually understand my own unique set of character strengths and how that kind of helps me break down barriers with other people by being able to understand them a little bit better as well. Whether that's a coworker, another leader, or even my husband or kids, I now have the advantage of being comfortable in the uncomfortable conversations. So what I've tried to do as I run into these kind of discrepancies is I really lean into humility. Humility as a characteristic I think is often overlooked when we define what a great leader is, male or female. And I think that right now, when we find ourselves in this contradictory lens of a strong and driven woman, and people call us emotional or too aggressive and we need to be softer, I use those moments to have a teachable conversation. I put humility out there and ask to talk about it. Why are you saying what you're saying? Why are you feeling what you're feeling when the two of us are exhibiting the same characteristics and strengths? By having that head-on conversation and just trying to understand why and being humble rather than making assumptions, I'm showing that humility is a strength and something that opens a lot of doors. And I've found that it's been very successful in breaking down this perception of strong and driven, and how males tend to carry it differently than females.
Definitely. Thanks, Lindsey. You hit on some great points there. What about you, Laurine? Have you challenged or faced any specific challenges throughout your career?
Yeah, so just listening to Lindsey and listening to Amanda, I have to say that the challenges that I faced in my career as a woman and as a minority woman have involved meeting people along the way that didn't believe in me or in my ability to achieve the same as others. And I will tell you that there's other labels that come sometimes where people, based on where you live demographically and what your experiences are, you can get labeled angry, aggressive, all kinds of things. But the more significant impact was my own self-esteem. I started believing them. And my self-confidence issues were rooted in the stereotypes of being from a certain place. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, from the inner city, and feeling marginalized in my own in my own mind because I didn't believe I was going to be accepted. So it made me come across more defensive, and it made me come across almost as if I had a whole lot of fight, because the truth is I did have to fight harder to be heard and to move forward. But sometimes I fought a little too hard, fought harder than necessary, where people were actually not fighting against me. It was me fighting against the perceptions of what I thought they thought about me. And so I didn't recognize when the shift happened. So it's one thing to climb the mountain because you have to start at the bottom and climb to the top. But at some point along the line, as I moved from the GS3 to the SES, there was a shift changing in my leadership where I wasn't looking up to get there. Instead, I was somewhere in the middle, and there were other women, younger women, and others looking up to me to try to get there. And I was also achieving. Some of the things that helped me, so I call it climbing the mountain. Climbing the mountain, you got to know where you are on the mountain. Are you starting at the very, very bottom? Are you somewhere in the middle? And are you at the top? And you have a few responsibilities when you get midway. And one of those is to not be afraid to reach up and ask for help. But the other is don't ever forget to reach back and help other women get there. It doesn't have to be one person on the mountain, and it doesn't have to be that and I'll just say only one Black person succeeds, and only one of us can be at the top, or only one woman can be at the top. And a lot of times it's because we try to protect territory around us that we get we find ourselves in a defense posture, because sometimes we are the first women to ever embark on these roles. So with the help of mentors and peers, don't forget your peers and the people around you, I was able to make necessary transitions. And once the adjustments were made, I found space for other people. And I do believe that that is our responsibility too, to be on the same mountain. I found space for other people to stand right alongside me. I would say as women on these leadership journeys in this space, we're not necessarily like sometimes our male counterparts. People don't just place us on top of the mountain. I've seen people who, I used to work in a computer room, a computer department in VA at one time in my career, and I was a GS57, and I saw somebody come and be placed who was a male in that same department at a GS13, and he knew nothing about computers. Those realities do exist, and that was several years ago, but it still exists today. But we've got to learn how to understand where we are, and when we get there, the responsibility that we have on a leadership journey in the spaces that we are. But the main thing I would say for me was overcoming, getting myself out the way, getting out of my own way. And so I would say that was the tremendous challenge I had.
Thank you, Laurine. That is the mountain analogy. It's something that we can all relate to at some point in our career, for sure. Charmain, what about you? Any challenges that you experienced throughout your career?
I think each one of these ladies shared a challenge where I could feel myself in that same situation. One thing I'll say is it kind of speaks to what Laurine was talking about. You start at a certain level in your career, and as you move up and you look around, it doesn't look so much like you as you do that. And it was important for me, I like your analogy, Laurine, I'm going to have to use that, to look down and pull people up with me, females up with me, but also look up and see mentors around. And like Maria, I didn't have many female leaders. It wasn't until I stepped into the senior executive ranks that I had my first female boss. And it really hit me the difference in the dynamic of having a female leader in my immediate chain versus previous male leaders in my chain. There was more of a connection there. I felt more of a willingness to share about my experiences as a female, or if I had self-doubt about something. And I appreciated that I had a leader who said, you have a seat at the table and you need to make sure your voice is heard. That was very important to me, because it gets to what else was said about, that self-doubt that sometimes eats at you in terms of, should I be here? Am I worthy? Should I speak up? Yes, you should speak up. Yes, you are worthy. And yes, you have a seat at the table. So, if anything, those challenges have made me stronger and have put me in the position I'm in today.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for being so open and honest and sharing these experiences. I'm sure there are so many women out there who can relate and who really understand and go through the same situations. So each of you really hit on similar topics. And two things that I want to talk about next is leadership and women in leadership positions, and how specifically do we as women break the stereotypes in the professional environment that are surrounded by women and achieve such leadership experiences? How do we break those barriers and move up into the ranks? Amanda, you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, so I use my voice as a platform for military women veterans, and I think the first step for helping other women veterans is for me to be brave and to share my story, which I think sometimes people think it's easy because I do it a lot and it gets easier each time I do it. But every time I share a different part of my story, especially a part I haven't shared before, it's not easy to do that. But I've learned that if you're willing to go first, that opens up a door for someone else. And so I just think that we need to share our stories. I've seen the power of sharing stories through the podcast, not only from the women who are listening to the podcast, but also the women who are opening up and sharing about their experience that they may have never shared with anyone. And now they have not only a place to share it, but a platform to share it on. And so I think just being brave and sharing our stories, having panels like this where we can talk about different experiences from different aspects of different career fields is a great way to get started, because you can hear about our experiences and you can learn from them. And it's interesting how much resonates between all the different career fields.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thanks, Amanda. Laurine, what about you? How do you think women can break the stereotypes and succeed in leadership roles and move to leadership positions?
So I'm just a storyteller at heart. So I will tell you that I heard a story before that said that when a woman in a society is not doing well, then the society is not doing well. I just think that the way we break those barriers is to be our authentic selves as women, stop apologizing for our tears, for our emotions, for our feminine intuition. Instead, we need to embrace those and wear them as capes, as our superpowers, because they keep us grounded. They keep us in touch with humanity and compassionate and empathetic. They are good customer service resource tools. And when you are in a field, especially in our field of caring for veterans, it is important to keep the veterans' face in front of us and remember that's a family. And so when I look at helping a child of a veteran, I'm helping my daughter, I'm helping my own sister. We've got to stop apologizing and break those barriers by allowing ourselves to be who we are authentically.
Awesome. Thank you. Maria, what about you? Any advice to breaking the stereotypes and rising to women leadership positions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's also so important to simply lead by example. That, as Laurine was saying, like, there's no need to apologize for simply being who you are, who happens to be a woman, and doing your job and doing it well. And as you continue to do your job, as I do, and I put forth policy objectives and make recommendations to members and the ranking member, I'm simply doing what I need to do to accomplish those objectives. And it's one of those where people will notice and they will see, oh, she's not just doing her job, she's doing it well. There's a reason she's in this position. There's a reason that her staff and her team are looking up to her or are executing on the larger plan. And that will have a trickle-down effect. I don't have to justify, I don't have to prove it. I just need to do what I was hired to do.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Charmain, anything to add?
Yeah, all great points. I would say in terms of, I hear it all the time about the stereotypes. I've seen it where I've walked into the room and they're like, why is she here? How did she get here? And I don't have to prove myself to anybody. The only person I have to prove myself is to myself. If I walk in the room, I know my stuff. I'm doing my job, as Maria said. I'm being confident in myself, I'm being unapologetic, like Laurine said, guess what? Then you will accept me and embrace me, and that will knock down the stereotypes and the labels. And we as women, we also have to band together too, right?
Yeah.
I just have to stress that we have to band together when it comes to these issues to challenge people in terms of these labels that they put on us in the workforce. We're just as qualified, we're just as educated, we're just as smart, and we're here to deliver. So embrace that. I think that's critical when you're thinking about the labels that are put on us, the leadership roles that we're taking on. We have a right to have a seat at the table just like anybody else.
Definitely. And Lindsey, any final thoughts on women breaking the stereotypes?
Yes, Charmain, you had a great intro into kind of what I would love to add to the conversation about banding together. We grew up in this environment as women who strived to be leaders and felt very isolated. At least that's how I did. I felt I had a lot of gaps in my life growing up that I just had to scrap through and figure it out on my own, that I was on my own to figure it out and prove myself. What I would like to offer to women out there listening is that having a support system is really important. We don't need to be competitive with each other. We should be empowering each other. But understand that creating the right support system isn't going to fall into your lap. You have to have some self-awareness of what it is you want to aspire to be, but also what you have to aspire others with, and create that support. I worked really hard on myself to understand my strengths and weaknesses. And now I've surrounded myself with women that are stronger than me in order to kind of push me to be stronger in places that I may not be as strong in right now. But I had to work to find that support system. I had to go out. I had to be vulnerable. I had to ask people for advice. I had to ask the tough questions because I wanted to learn. And I think sometimes breaking that first awkward step of humility and vulnerability as a woman that we're trying not to play into, but really we should be putting that out there even more and showing how powerful of a tool those two things can be as a leader.
Definitely. Thanks, Lindsey. And I think one of the things which we'll continue to talk about is just women realizing their voice matters in this conversation. And we're going to move to that in a second. But first, I want to pause and see, we're not getting any questions yet from the audience, but we do have some comments and comments of support. So we're going to pop those on the screen so I can give a shout out. Trish says, amazing women on this panel. Thanks, Trish, for watching on Facebook. And I think, let's see if we got any else. Okay. Well, I just want to remind, and Trish also says, I definitely can relate. Their stories and their lessons for us are so important to share. Thanks, Trish. And I just want to point out to the audience, one more from Teresa. Agree so much with you, Amanda. Awesome. So just a quick pointer to the audience. If you have questions for our panelists or topics you want us to cover, feel free to shoot those in the comment section on whatever platform you're watching on. Okay, awesome. So the next thing, we're talking about accomplishments and we're talking about women voices in the veteran and military community. And one thing, like I said, that we're talking about is voices and our women voices. We all work in a male kind of dominated community and environment. The military is very men heavy, and women have come to run through the ranks and become those leaderships. But how can women continue to prove that in this male dominant community and environment that their voices matter and should be part of the conversation? Charmain, you want to start us off with this one?
Sure. So what I'll say is that I mentioned this earlier, they don't have to prove themselves, right? Just be yourself, speak your truth, go with your gut in terms of what direction you should take, what you should say, and where you should be. And I think that confidence will exude and people will see that and accept that and embrace that. And if someone doesn't, then that is their issue, not your issue. And it gets back to, I love the fact of reaching out versus, in terms of when I talked about the banding together, and then we talked about reaching out and networking. That's important too, to make sure you have a strong support system around you when you're going through your trials and tribulations, just to run your ideas or your ideas or thoughts against someone, or someone to talk to about what you're going through. But don't doubt, what you bring to the table. Don't doubt the environment you're in. People can sense that. It's like they say they can smell fear. They can smell when you are insecure and when you're not confident and you're not bringing your A game. So just always bring your A game. And as long as you know that you feel like you're being 100% yourself, you should feel proud about that. You should feel good about that at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Maria, what about you? The importance of women voices in these conversations.
I completely agree with Charmain. I think there's something to be said for simply being who you are and not apologizing for it. I also think there's something to be said for that the female perspective and a feminine approach is not a weakness. That we may approach a given situation differently than our male counterparts. We may have a different take on it. And we may view it through a different lens, but that's not a negative. That adds to the solution. It's adding a dimension that your male counterparts may not be seeing. And by viewing all the angles and taking all of that into consideration, you're going to have a better product, a better solution, and in our field, a better outcome for veterans. And that's really what's the most important thing at the end of the day. Whether it comes from a woman or a man, it's ensuring that all of those components are captured, because the worst thing you want is to have something fall through the cracks, have somebody spot something that your team didn't spot, and if you could have had a better solution. And I think that's the important part, is to see the female perspective as a benefit and as a value add, as opposed to something to be neutralized.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thanks, Maria. Lindsey, any thoughts to add?
Sure. I think Maria is spot on with the power of the softer skills that women are bringing to the table. American culture is finally shifting and opening up to the importance of social emotional intelligence, mental health, and the power that these soft skills bring to the table within leadership. And I think that's a direct correlation to seeing more women be confident in themselves and putting themselves out there and becoming leaders in whatever environment they are, whether it's within the veteran community or not. I have the pleasure to work directly with and learn from a handful of women who are paving a new path within the veteran service organization industry. And to the point that everyone's kind of been making, right now, the military and the veteran industry is very male heavy. So it's been a bumpy but very powerful and motivating shift that I've been lucky to be a part of and learn from. And I think that the confidence women are having as we step into these leadership positions are making a huge shift that, we might not be able to see now, but to the mountain analogy, the people, the girls watching us are seeing that confidence, and they're saying like, hey, I can do that too. And I think that's fantastic. I'm really excited to continue to be part of that shift and learn from other women leaders as we all put our own unique voices out there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thanks, Lindsey. And Laurine, what about you? Any thoughts about the women voice and the women perspective in the veteran community?
Sure. So I thought about the fact, and having been working at the VA so long, though continuously changing now, most of government and what we know about government was developed in the 50s or the 60s. And it was at a time when women were not in leadership roles in the federal government, in the military. And so, believe it or not, still today, we're dealing with a very paternalistic construct, a very paternalistic institution. And so it is modernizing, and we are developing, and we are creating some more of we're taking an environmental scan, and we are looking at some of the softer skills that are necessary to have thriving workforces. So Me personally, and one thing that I tell as I mentor other young ladies is that, our moral fiber and our metal, our spirit is composed a little differently. And it's okay for it to be differently because it's about allowing us to have that inclusivity that creates what I call, when you include various voices, you create more synergies and you move from the me smarts or the individual smarts to the we smarts. And so getting diversity of thought and diversity of opinion means that you've got to embrace all that it is about you unapologetically, like all of the other ladies said, because I believe that building those types of spaces and us demanding that our teams be comprised of those types of spaces will sustain workplaces and make them healthy workplaces. And so women are needed in these roles in order for that to occur.
Definitely. I love that you mentioned mentorship because you actually have someone who commented who gave you a special shout out from Marcella, who goes, shout out to Laurine, who has inspired me for many years. So congrats, Laurine. We appreciate it. And Amanda, do you have any closing thoughts on women voices and women perspectives?
Yes. I mean, I have a podcast that highlights women veterans and their stories. And as a woman veteran, it was kind of surprising to me how much history of military women I didn't know. One of the best examples is the women Air Force service pilots. I served in the Air Force, and I never had heard of them in my ROTC or my military experience. And they're a pivotal piece of Air Force history that people don't talk about, or at least they weren't talking about when I was in the military. And I think when we're able to share the stories of what women have done, people start to listen and people start to realize there's so much more to women in the military and women in the workplace than we actually know, because women were often told, don't talk about your story, don't do this. That's what the WASP were told. They were told, don't go back to your normal life and don't tell anyone what you did, that you were flying planes for the Air Force during World War II. And I think that our voices and our stories are so important and they're so powerful, and there's so much history that was lost that now is coming out because we're starting to share those stories and hear those stories of women and be empowered by what women have done and what women are doing today.
Definitely. Thanks, Amanda. So the title of this broadcast is The Accomplishments of the Women of the HillVets 100. So obviously we go through our struggles and, it's part of the process, sadly, but accomplishments, it makes it all worth it once we achieve. So I want to ask everyone, what is their proudest accomplishment that they have achieved throughout their career? Let's turn it on a positive note here. Maria, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I would think legislatively, my biggest accomplishment, my proudest moment was our current full committee ranking member when he first came on as the subcommittee that handles benefits issues, really spearheaded appeals reform. And so veterans, of course, filed their claims with VBA. Laurine is very familiar with that. The claims side of the process, and if the veteran doesn't receive the outcome they want, they can appeal that. And we were over 500,000 appeals pending, and it was taking an incredible amount of time. 10 years was not unusual. And Ranking Member Boss made that one of his priorities on the subcommittee, partnering with the department and with the VSOs and other stakeholders. And that was something where I had a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, because he empowered me to be his emissary and to represent his views on what that process should ultimately look like. And that was ultimately signed into law and working very closely with our Senate partners. And it has completely changed how the department handles appeals. And it has been incredible to watch that unfold, particularly given my background working at the board, working at NVLSP and representing veterans, and also the trust he placed in me. And that really had an incredible impact on our professional relationship. And now he, has tasked me with being his full committee staff director, which has just been an incredible honor. And, I think that really, it goes to show how I do think to a certain extent, one of my opening comments was that I've never worked for another woman. I've generally worked for men. But I also, in reflecting on that, want to highlight that simply, while I have always worked for men, I have worked for men who have also valued me and have valued my skills. So I wanted to just be clear that while we may not have as many women in leadership roles as we have men, one of the reasons that, at least speaking personally for myself, I've been able to accomplish what I have professionally is working frequently for men who have valued me. It's not despite I'm a woman, it's they have simply valued me for me and the expertise I bring to the table and my views and my opinions, and that they have empowered me. And so much of that has allowed me to achieve what I have, include working with other women and, both senior and junior to me, and learning from them and hopefully mentoring others. And, I think that all of that is wrapped up together in professional accomplishment.
Definitely. Charmain, what has been your biggest accomplishment or the accomplishment you're most proud of?
Personally, it's becoming a mom, but professionally, I will tell you, it was actually stepping into this role, and Laurine knows a little bit about this. I was actually on temporary assignment in compensation service. And there was a lot happening in the education space. And at the time, the leadership had asked me, would I in my temporary assignment early, when I was having fun learning so much in compensation service, especially from people like Laurine, who's a wealth of knowledge in that area, to go back to education service. And I said, well, can I do this? And they asked me to go back as the acting director. And I said, would I be able to take this on? There's this big storm brewing at the time as it related to some legislation that we were trying to implement. We were having IT issues, you name it, it was happening. Post-Lama GI Bill was in the news every single day. And I was like, can I do this? I want to make sure I still have a little bit of work-life balance, because at the time I still had my little one, and she was 2 at the time. I said, I don't know about can I do this, but I want to do this. I want to go back and I want to make things right. The GI Bill program is such an awesome program, so many amazing things. I know this is a storm that's happening right now, but I know it'll pass. And I believe I'm the person that can help with that from a leadership standpoint. So I went back and I took on the role as acting, and ended up becoming the permanent director. But that's not the highlight of the story. The highlight of the story is that as a team, we were able to come out of that storm. We were able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We were able to get back to providing, amazing services to student veterans, which was critical. Building that relationship back and that trust back with that community. And I will tell you, when I first stepped back into education, I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I was concerned and had doubts and sleepless nights. But it all worked out at the end. And that was a proud moment for me to look around and to see my division, in a place where they felt proud again of what we do and who we serve and why we do what we do. We could get really focused back on the mission and where should we be headed in the future. It's one thing when you're leading a division when everything's rosy and perfect. It's another when you're leading a division when there's a storm, a major hurricane, I will say, brewing, and trying to come out of that. So that was a really big accomplishment, and really a moment for me where it just put a smile on my face to see how far we came over a 2-year period from where we started.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I'm so happy that we were able to bring you and Laurine back together, coworkers.
I talk to her all the time.
I love that. I love it. Laurine, what about you? What's your biggest accomplishment, or the accomplishment you're most proud of?
Yeah, so I thought about it, and so when I look back over my career, I had the opportunity, a beautiful opportunity, to work on a project for the department on establishing a change in policy and regulations that would allow us to allow persons who have mental health illnesses and have emergent needs, regardless of their discharge, to be seen at any VA hospital facility. So I had the opportunity to work on that in 2017. it wasn't just important to me because it involved, it allowed, it definitely opened up the access and it allowed veterans to get their needs, but because I personally had raised a child who has mental health issues, and she's an adult now. But it being so close and understanding, I empathize tremendously with caregivers and family members who have to deal with these issues. My greatest, proudest accomplishment is being a mom. And I wrote because I raised my children as a single mom. And it wasn't perfect. And my daughter's probably listening right now and is going to say, yeah, she would say, I'm a lot of drama. I'd probably say that reverse. But I can't say that they always understood me, but they're thriving adults now and they're beautiful women. I did that while I was going back to college to get 2 degrees, working for the VA, moved around the country 3 times, just me and those 2 little girls, and moved up the career ladder from the GS3 to the SES. That's my greatest accomplishment.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. Amanda, what about you? What has been your biggest accomplishment?
I would also say being a mom, but for my business, I would say starting my podcast, Women of the Military. When I started the podcast, it kind of was a crazy idea and I didn't know what was going to happen. And now I have over 127 episodes and I've got to interview generals and women who've served for 4 years and the whole gamut of stories. And it's changed my life in a way that I never expected. And I just love what I get to do, to talk to other women, to share our stories, and to empower the next generation of military women. And so I'm really thankful that I get to do the podcast each week, and I'm excited to see where it's going to go. But it was the risk that I took that I never expected to grow the way that it did, and I'm so happy that it did.
Awesome. It's all about the risks, right? Lindsey, what about you? What about your biggest accomplishment or proudest achievement?
It's a tough question. I think everyone here, we all get a little, talking about ourselves and our accomplishments isn't our first go-to. I would say that everybody on here has touched on something that I can deeply relate to. Professionally, I didn't anticipate working in the nonprofit industry. After our friend Brendan was killed in Afghanistan, it was almost an emotional reaction to reach out to Janet and Ryan Manion, who had only a few years prior lost their son and brother, respectively, Travis. And one of Janet's coping mechanisms was to start this foundation. She never wanted people to forget Travis's name and who he was. And they embraced me with open arms, and they allowed me the opportunity to dig into creativity, which is something that's incredibly important to me. So for the first 7 years at Travis Manion Foundation, I gave my blood, sweat, and tears to developing, growing, and creating our foundation's 9/11 Heroes Run 5K race series experience that's about spreading those stories, making sure that people don't forget the sacrifices of our veterans and first responders, and remembering the names of the loved ones that our survivors are now living lives without. I grew that from, a local Doylestown, Pennsylvania area event to over 50 races across the country and internationally. And while the logistical side of program development and project management is something that I nerd out about, I'm really proud about being able to be a part of the foundation where we just want people to honor our heroes. We're empowering the veterans and survivors to learn about themselves in order to go out and really develop our next generation, the youth. We all talk about how we wish we had mentors or we looked up to people, and I'm really excited to be part of an organization where character and leadership development is what we do. I will say though, and everyone's touched on it here, I love being a mom. I would couple that in becoming accomplished in some of the stuff that I've done for TMF. Burnout is real. I moved cross country, active duty, military spouse twice, both times 8 months pregnant. And then moving to new places, and my husband would deploy immediately, all while still working full time for the foundation. So while I'm incredibly proud of the tangible accomplishments that I've been able to support the foundation with, finding that life balance and being able to show that it's not a choice for women to be successful in the career or successful with your family, that we can and we do both, and we do it really dang well. So for me, that finding balance and also being conscious of those struggles that I had in finding that balance, I make sure that the team I work with and anybody that I come into conversation with, that I'm open with them about struggles, okay, and I'm always here for you, and talking about building that support system. And that's not just for women and leaders. We do that for the veteran community at Travis Manion Foundation, by giving them the tools to self-develop in their character strengths and really go outside of what the military leadership programs tend to lean into, and say, hey, identify what your strengths are and identify how you want to go back and make an impact in your community by leaning into those, giving them that power to make a change in the way that they want. It might not be my direct accomplishment, but I'm really proud to be part of that opportunity for them.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Thanks, Lindsey. You actually just got a shout out from Tina, who's watching on Facebook. She says, incredible job, team. All of you are so inspiring and the epitome of strong, successful women. Proud to work alongside Lindsey every day and learn from her strength and leadership. Thanks for watching, Tina. So we're almost at the end of our time here, but I want to close out with one final question on my end before I give you all a chance to leave with closing thoughts, and ask, what advice do you have for women who are interested in pursuing a career in your own respective field, whatever that is? So Charmain, you want to start us off with this one? Any advice for people looking to get involved in the executive branch or veteran services?
Sure. And I just want to touch on something Lindsey said that just touched me in terms of, we don't choose one or the other. We do both, and we do it very dang well. I think that's basically the gist of what you just said. That is so true. So I tell individuals, if you're thinking about executive service, if you're thinking about, moving up the ranks in federal service to that senior executive level, women in particular, you don't have to choose between your career and your personal life. Yes, there are sacrifices that are made along the way, but you can do it if that's really your passion. Don't feel guilty about it. I know me, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, I have this little one and this, that, and nature. And it was nice to talk to other women who are already in the senior executive ranks who said, I was able to do it. There are moments where sometimes you're working a little late, but then you have to figure out how not to miss ballet and soccer and things of that nature. What's most important to you? And that was one of the things that I didn't apologize for when I took this role. I said, hey, if I'm going to take this role, I do have a little one. I do want to make sure I could take her to ballet classes and swim lessons. And I'm not going to miss those kind of events for the sake of my job, but I still love what I do. So I want the women out there to really know, when you're thinking about moving up the ranks and taking on this kind of position, that you can have it all. I know people say, oh, you can't have it all. Shush. You can have it all if you want to have it all. Some days you just got to balance it out. Okay. And I hope that people realize family comes first. And when you take on those roles, you have to be very clear with those expectations of whoever's hiring you.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Thanks, Charmain. Maria, what about you? Any advice for women who are looking to pursue a career on Capitol Hill or in policy specifically?
Yeah, I think I'd like to echo some the comments, Charmain just made and prior on Lindsey. It's absolutely, like, your family, you shouldn't look at being a woman and having a family as a limiting feature. I had both my children while working on the Hill. My son is 4, my daughter is 1. I mentioned before, Laurine and we've run into each other professionally. She frequently testified before the subcommittee when I was in that role, and she will attest to the fact that I would huff and puff my way into briefings and meetings and things. and you do find ways to make it work. I think what Charmain was saying about setting expectations and setting boundaries is important. I think that the workplace is changing. I think, obviously we're going to have a whole new normal coming out of the pandemic about what the work-life balance is, with the focus now on telework. But even focusing on an in-office environment, it's a matter of, hey, this is a time I need to leave in order to be home. And I understand I won't always make dinner with the family if there is some pressing deadline or what have you, but I will be home for bedtime. And, I think as long as you're clear and you approach it appropriately with your leadership, it's never been a problem for me. I think people are often surprised to hear that I have not had challenges balancing, work and home, particularly on the Hill, which is known to be an intense environment with, unpredictable, potentially long hours, frequently long hours. But I think it's all about what it is you're able to make of it. And it is incumbent on you, though. No one's going to come to you and say, how can I make your work-life balance work? It's up to you to do that. And I think as long as you're your own advocate, and again, in an appropriate way, you want to, of course, you don't want to be too, disrespectful about it, but to be firm but professional. I think the other thing I'd say is people ask me, how did I get into the Hill? I'm not that person who interned through college or law school or, worked my way up from staff assistant, which is a much more traditional path when you're looking to break into public policy in the legislative branch. I was already an attorney and had been an attorney for many years, and, happened to, become professional colleagues with someone who was on the committee and said, hey, just so you know, we're going to have this availability. And the chairman at the time wants someone with practical experience in the field. He wants someone who's going to come in and know the policy inside and out. And you can learn the rest of the Hill culture and legislative process once you get here. That won't be an issue. And so I did come in directly as a subcommittee staff director. I think that the possibilities and the options are out there. And quite frankly, they'll find you when you're not looking for them and when you're not expecting it. But you do need to be open to taking the leap of faith, because it was not a career path I thought I was interested in. And here I am many years later, now the staff director for the full committee. Also something that just, came somewhat unexpectedly and fortuitously. And I think that the biggest thing is not to close yourself off to opportunities just because they're unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Thanks, Maria. Amanda, what about you? Do you have any advice for women who are interested in pursuing entrepreneur opportunities or creative opportunities like your podcast?
Yeah, I think the best advice is to get started and to be aware that you probably won't go in a straight line. My entrepreneurship journey is like a zigzag roller coaster of lots of changing and pivoting and trying something and not having it work and then trying something and seeing. But I want to go back to the boundaries, because even though I'm my own boss, I still have to set really good boundaries, because I think maybe I'm even harder on myself than a boss would be, where I'm like, no, you need to keep working, you need to keep working. And so in the last 6 months, I've learned a lot about setting personal boundaries for myself and finding that work-life balance of, even though I have the flexibility of setting my hours and choosing what I will do, sometimes it's hard to say no to opportunities. And so I've been really using these boundaries to help me to make wise decisions and not say yes to everything. And just because you're an entrepreneur doesn't mean that you're not going to run into this work-life balance thing. I think that's just part of working, is that especially when you're passionate about something, you just want to work and you want to get the mission done. I'm so military. You want to get the mission done, and then just to be able to set those boundaries so that you can make the right decision for you and your family. But the first thing is to get started in whatever you want to do and then pivot along the way.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Thanks, Amanda. Laurine, what about you? Any advice for people who are interested in pursuing executive branch positions?
Yes, so I would say have a plan. I am just one of those people. I put on the IDP before I left New Jersey. I didn't know how to drive. So I put that I needed to be able to drive by X date in order to move and pick the positions where I wanted around the country, because I had already moved up from the 3 to 13 and I wanted to move to the next position, but I wasn't going to be able to get it in the local area. So I put on my IDP that by the time I was 40, I was going to have to learn how to drive. And it took 22 driving lessons. I paid for them out of pocket, but I did it. But I put it on a plan. Chart out your course for what you want and where you want it. And if you want it today and you don't get it, don't give up, because if you really want it and it's meant for you, you have got to put back in for it. You've got to keep going. That's for leadership programs and for job opportunities. Keep going. Don't be afraid to find mentors and coaches. All of them will not be women. Some of them will be men. Write your qualifications and know who you are. Read them and write them again and again. Look for talent that is when you get there as a leader, look for talent that is not exactly like you so that you can grow your perspective and suspend your judgments. Journal about the journey along the way so that you can look back and be reflective in thought and let that provoke your thoughts as you lead others and mentor others. Be prepared for the climb. Know when you are close to or have reached the top and then reach back. If you have written your plan and it's your plan, then you have the authority to edit it any way you choose.
Thanks, Laurine. You actually got a few more shout outs, I think, from your daughter, Ayana.
Ayana.
Watching, Ayana. She says, amazing lady, so inspiring, uplifting. And then she says, go mom, you're a rock star. Thanks, Ayana, for watching. Lindsey, any advice for women who are pursuing advocacy work or nonprofit involvement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing I would offer is sometimes people underestimate or don't give enough credit to the power that volunteering has on your mental health, on inspiring you to feel empowered to do better for yourself. So if you've never volunteered, if you've never been involved in advocacy or the nonprofit industry, find something you're passionate about and go out and support them. The nonprofit world is always looking for volunteers. You can never have too many. That being said, at Travis Manion Foundation, we really push for our veterans and survivors and our inspired Spartans to self-develop themselves first. You can't help others if you're not comfortable with who you are and what you want to do and how you can be a help to someone else. So make sure you invest in yourself so that you can invest in your community. And then I think the last thing that I would just add is be the advocate for those around you that you wish you had in your corner during the good and the hard times. But also, and I can't stress this enough, be your own biggest advocate. Believe in yourself and use your voice to show and talk about, who you are and how you can make a difference.
Thanks, Lindsey. So we're closing up now this discussion. I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in, and a special thank you, especially to our panelists. And I'm going to give each of you a chance to close any thoughts, say anything that we, hadn't touched on that you'd like to share. I know, Laurine, you had a special poem for women veterans that you'd love to share. So I'm going to start it off with you. And then if anyone has any additional comments they'd like to close with, we will go to them. So Laurine, over to you for our poem.
Okay, so thank you so much. I'm a writer, I'm a poet, and I just really like writing. And as I've worked through VA and I've spoken to different groups and I've worked with women veterans, I did a dedication back in 2004 at a speech that I did, but wanted to share for Women's History Month in recognition of all of you who served. Thank you for your service. In a year like 1944, she fought beside him in the war. Amid dying men and sinking ships, there was no time to part her lips. Demanding her own equality, she served on land, in air, at sea. Through chilling war among the chosen, In the trenches, cold and frozen, memories frigid in her mind, a prisoner of war, stranded in time. Fighting with pride and dignity, there's a woman in our history. With politics and Vietnam, a child, a soldier in her arms, too close to the enemy's line, yet for the cause in trying times. Yet mentally, she must make note at home to gain the right to vote. Through Panama and Desert Storm, the coalitions she had to form, old secret foes now come to light, stolen touches in the night. She was shell-shocked, domesticated, equally enlisted, yet still separated. Friendly fires at her side, shrapnel scars she can no longer hide, and then unexpectedly to heaven, the Pentagon on 9/11. But her love of man and her country, enlisting for the freedom of the Iraqi, with all the things that life had taught her, she passes them down to her niece and her daughter, deployed for freedom and democracy with young soldiers' pride and dignity. She is a presence that we cannot ignore, there beside him in the war. Thank you.
Wow, Laurine, I just got goosebumps. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it. So beautiful. Does anybody else have any closing thoughts or comments or, thank you, shout outs they want to give before we finish up here?
I don't know how we give any comments after that beautiful poem. I mean, I'll just say great event. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I think there's awesome ladies on this panel who are just powerful and strong. And it was great to connect in this type of forum, to talk about our journey and our struggles and our accomplishments. It's nice to hear from one another, and appreciate all that called in to or watching live from Facebook to watch this event. So again, Laurine, beautiful poem.
Thank you. And I do appreciate getting to know you all, some of you that I work with for years, just getting to know you personally. I feel encouraged and motivated and empowered just for having had this forum with you all here. So thank you all.
Definitely. Well, thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And unfortunately, the HillVets Gala was canceled, so we weren't able to honor you in person, but hopefully we're able to gather in person soon, and we'll be able to give you the proper recognition that you deserve for all of the amazing accomplishments that you have all achieved throughout your career. So thank you again so much for being here. To our audience, thank you for tuning in, for your comments and support along the way. And be sure to follow HillVets on all social media to stay up to date on all things HillVets 100 and 100. And we hope everyone has a great rest of their night and stay safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you.